Welcome to the BDI Empowers podcast, where experts simplify disability benefits so you don't waste years figuring them out. Now, get empowered.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here with Anita Gardner. Today, we're going to talk about best practices working with caregivers. A lot of our sessions tend to be based on a lot of government policy and rules and regulations, and we talk about eligibility criteria and a lot of standards and things. And this is a different kind of conversation. This is more of a providing support to families, recognizing how important caregiving is to our lives, and trying to identify what are good practices, what are those best practices that are going to work for each person. It may be different. Your family's needs versus another family's needs may be quite different. So there's different things to look at. But having said that, there may be some processes to follow and some information to share that can be helpful for everyone.
This is sponsored by Team Risk Management, which is a organization that provides payroll for caregivers, which also provides insurance and tax. They take out the taxes, they do the 1099s. It's a wonderful group to use for caregiving services.
Let's talk about what we want to do today. And I think the primary reason that Anita and I are leading this session is because we live this journey. So a lot of the work that we do is based on our lived experiences as parents with loved ones with disabilities. So my guy is 32 years old, has autism with a lot of other co-occurring conditions. And so we've been in the process of having caregivers for, quite a while, but really focusing on in earnest and utilizing like waiver services for caregiving probably since 2011. So it's been a minute. And I want to use this as a platform to open discussion about, what we've learned, University of Hard Knocks learning. Okay. It's like all the things that we've learned from things that have worked well. Let's continue to do those things because they are working well. What are some things that didn't work well? And how important it is sometimes to trust your gut. You can have a wonderful resume in front of you and somebody can present themselves really lovely in an interview, but then day one, if it doesn't feel right, you want to listen to that. So we're going to talk a lot about lived experiences as it relates to these learning outcomes. And what we want to look to first is that retrospective approach of what's or who is going to be the right caregiver for my loved one. And let's be purposeful and intentional about what a profile might look like for that individual so that that's going to help us create a framework for recruitment as well as hiring and training. So that caregiver profile, I think, is really key. We want to spend quite a bit of time talking about why that's important and what that might look like in terms of meeting your loved one's needs, behavioral needs, health needs, all of those things, as well as style and personality needs, having shared interests. That's how important that's going to be. So developing a caregiver profile is going to be central to our conversation today. And I think one of the big issues that we face is, where are we going to get these people? So once we get to that comfort zone of recognizing I need to have help, I can't do it all myself. A lot of moms, including myself, feel like I have trouble letting go. It's like, I got to live forever. That dynamic of having somebody else in full care of my guy is in equal terms exciting and terrifying. So how do we manage through that? So these are the things that we want to talk about today. And I think recruitment is a challenge. Having said that, I have 2 caregivers that are looking for more work. So I'm like, and they're amazing caregivers. So when we get to that part where we talk about recruitment techniques, there's lots of places that you can go to, but it's never going to replace your own networking. So that's going to be a focal point of our conversation. We're going to talk about personal and professional boundaries. I'm going to absolutely share how I frequently cross those boundaries every day. And I'm working on that. I'm a work in progress. But when you have, caregivers that are in and out of your home that are there in a crisis, it's hard to maintain a personal, professional boundary when they have become family to you. And it's a very interesting thing with some of my son's former care providers who are now natural supports, that over time that relationship changes. And I think that's something that we want to look to as a goal, if you will. But I mean, the bottom line is there can never be too many people who are invested in the well-being of our kids. The more people that we have who can be supports to us, whether paid supports or natural supports, that's going to be essential for their ongoing safety and well-being. And, I worry about, the mental load, all those dynamics of managing care and managing all those other pieces, the administrative pieces, like who's going to do that? We've got to figure that out. It's going to be a matter of compartmentalizing some of these responsibilities, looking to, I think I initially was looking just like within my family, like who's going to be doing this, with me or after me. And now it's more, what professional organization can I use to lean into to provide that kind of support? So this almost goes without saying, but it would be remiss for us not to recognize how absolutely critical the right caregiver is. And I try to be purposeful with my guy and the caregivers that he has, and he needs variety. And so what that means is I need to have people who are going to regularly engage with him in a variety of different ways. And for him, variety is the spice of life. For others, continuity and the sameness of one day into another is key to success and enjoyment. So the bottom line, though, is no matter who it is or what kind of structure or what kind of dynamic they bring, they're essential. Without them, we can't do this alone. And this is why do y'all doom scroll? Does anybody else doom scroll at night? You're flipping through and you start looking in your feed, and I go into Disability Scoop and I go into all these groups and I start panicking because I don't like what the administration is saying about devaluing the home and community-based services and pushing back on families, that this whole families need to do more dynamic. That's got to change. No. Parents can't do this all by themselves indefinitely. It's not, leaning into family is not a workable model. So it's important that we expand that model. But at the same time as we're expanding that model, we need to have individuals who are coming in with the right skills, with the right heart, not that I need this as a part-time gig because, I'm trying to get to a certain financial goal. No, they have an intrinsic motivation to make a difference in the lives of somebody else, to want to care. Those are the things that are so, so important. But we need those caregivers so that we can continue to grow. That's one of the underreported benefits of a caregiver is, my guy's like, your mom, he loves mom. We have an enmeshed relationship. The apron strings are really short. Mom, but I'm mom. And he knows that I'm his mom, and he knows that I'm always going to be there unconditionally to take care of him. So do you think he's going to, take on new skills as freely with me? No. And this has always been the case. When he was, I guess, 18-ish and learning to shave. I mean, I tried for years, literally 4 years, trying to teach him to shave. And it became a point of battle because, he's a big guy and he wants to do it himself, but he doesn't need some help. It was not a good situation. And his first care provider was someone that I hired as he was a camp counselor. And I remember when I was that weird parent that I would drop Eric off, and instead of just like, woohoo, I'm gone, I would hang around and watch to see who he interacted with and all of this. And so there was this counselor who they immediately reconnected, like had been a whole year since they'd seen each other, but he remembered that he loved Spider-Man, and they immediately, launched into playing Spider-Man with each other. And I was like, I've got to have this guy. Who is this guy? So being weird mom that I was, I was like, hey, love that you're, interacting with Eric, are you in college? Like, and turns out, he lived just like 15 miles from me. Yes. He was a college student. And so he was Eric's first care provider. And one of the things that he did was immediately like, we're going to learn to shave. And I had floundered literally for years trying to teach this. And Dylan was able, in a span of 4 months, to go from Eric being resistant to doing it fully independently. And even this morning, I'm giving Eric his meds, and we're going over the schedule of the day because that's part of our routine. And, he was like, shave, because he knows he's going to BDI tomorrow. He says, got to shave. I'm like, yes, you got to shave. Wow. Okay. Granted, it's been a long time from there, but can you see the trajectory where it starts with an introduction of a skill and having those other supports to aid and abet that process? So it's been critical for us. It's been so critical for us. I've had to do a couple of events where, overnight trips. There was a conference I was supposed to go to in May that I'm like, I don't have the right setup yet. Like, I'm not comfortable leaving. That's an ongoing challenge that we face. So part of our challenge is to continue. It's an ongoing challenge of continuing to grow that network, and so that we have some depth. And what I've learned is that if I want to take a trip, I have to have a team. Like, we always joke, I need to clone myself. It's like, okay, well, we kind of do, because the work that we do is going to take more than one caregiver to do in most cases. Anita, am I right on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely right on that. It definitely takes a village, for sure.
It really does. So if I'm going to plan a trip, in order for me to get that peace of mind, I'm going to need more than one caregiver. That's just how it's going to have to play out. I'm going to have other people checking in. I'm going to have a really clear schedule of activities. And at this time, like, somebody's there kind of administrating it all, but then there's going to be other supports. That's the only way it's going to happen for me. And that's hard. It's really, really hard. And even then, even when I send Eric off to camp, I'm tied to my cell phone like a ridiculous, crazy person. But, it goes off, and that's a number I don't know. My heart goes, is something happened? Did something go wrong? Did you have a meltdown? What's going on? So, and I've never, well, I have gotten that call. He did get hurt one year, but most times, we don't get those calls, but we're always ready for those calls. So that peace of mind, it's a lot for us to get to. It really is. And I think this is why this session, I think, is important. So we put these issues to the foremost, knowing that there's a lot of planning, and it's not just going to happen accidentally. It's going to be things that we have to do in order to get there. So let's talk a bit about what a caregiver profile might look like. Obviously, we want it to be person-centered, and unique. Who is going to be a good fit for my guy may not be a good fit for your guy. And, whoever we have has to be a personal, stylistic, and skill-based match to the needs of our loved ones. And so that's where that person-centeredness is so important. And that's, part of why I have always chosen to self-direct my care versus going to an agency, because I don't trust that process of having just, okay, caregiver A wasn't able to come in, so we're filling in with caregiver B. Who the heck is caregiver B? I don't know you. My son doesn't know you. And he's not that easy to read. So I need to make sure I know. I sound like such a control freak, Anita. I'm so sorry.
No.
I need to know. I need
Right.
to know who's taking care of my guy. And I need
Right.
to know that they know what is expected of them, what that's going to look like. So this dynamic of a profile, it's real to me. I know what that profile looks like for my son. I know what his interest is, what his personality is, and how we need somebody to add balance to that. If Eric's a little manic, I need somebody who can flex into the calm to create stability there. So creating that deliberate balance of personalities and interests, I think, is so important. Eric loves gaming. And if I have a care provider who has no interest in video games, that's going to fall kind of flat. If Eric wants to go in the community, he's always going to ask him. No, he's not going to go to Dave and Buster's all the time, but that's on his top wish list. Dave and Buster's. That's what he wants to do. So it's important that I have somebody who has that shared interest. So we have to look at the unique interests, the unique personalities at place here.
I was just going to mention that the caregiver that Eric has now, that to see the dynamic and see the shared interest is so powerful, because it's like just a regular conversation, and he gets Eric's language, and he gets what his interests are. And when he interjects something, he always has the appropriate response and just plays with him just like they're best buds. And it's really, really powerful to see that calm and that continuous care of calm and
right,
and just being there for Eric.
Right. One of the things he does really well is he flexes his energy. Mm-hmm. That he can be, generate excitement. Hey, let's do this, da 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 da, and get Eric all pumped up to do something. Likewise, if there's a crisis, he can be that, okay, it's going to be okay, and be, that rock of stability. So that ability to flex is such a huge skill. Yeah. And that's the thing, like when we talk about risk management, you have to think about what could go wrong. Mm-hmm. And, my guy has behavioral issues. Other people have pica issues. Other people have elopement issues. There's all kinds of different kinds of behaviors that we want to manage. I remember when I was helping Eric's friend get a waiver, we focused on her vulnerability. Mom needed to work. She just aged out of school. They had worked so hard on teaching her not to open the door to strangers. And the first week, FedEx guy's doing delivery, rings the doorbell, she opens the door. Nothing happened, but it could have happened. And so having that perspective of what do we need to do to keep this person safe in terms of managing their vulnerability, those risks of exploitation, all of those pieces need to come into play. And I think as parents, we want to focus on our kids' strengths. I mean, that's just natural. But when we're hiring a caregiver, we have to go there. We have to think about what's the worst case scenario? What could possibly go wrong? And manage to that, because then we have all of our bases covered. So these are the things that are the most common top qualities in a caregiver. And I'm looking at this and thinking, what really jumps out to me. And before I answer, Anita, what's jumping out as most important?
Patient, observant, flexibility, and adaptability are really the ones that pop out to me the most. Of course, being respectful and compassionate, but those kind of things come when you have that, somebody that's patient and observant to, like when the doorbell rings, they know to go answer the door with that individual instead of allowing that individual to go answer the door. And, I was going to say, when you were explaining Eric and shaving, was when my daughter was learning how to tie her shoes, I tried for 2 years and we just had meltdown after meltdown. And I was like, I'm giving up for a little while. Let me try this way. But one of her caregivers did it in a week. And I was like, wow, and I watched, and it was absolutely nothing that I did differently than she did. But, it's just that patience and that positivity too, that caregiver has. So it's knowing that person. And yeah, I guess the hard part is when you're looking to find that person is, you don't see that when you're interviewing them. You feel some of it, but after experience of having that caregiver is when it really dives into, you really know that that's the person. Like watching Eric and his caregiver communicate with each other, just sitting on the couch together, they're just talking away, and it's so calm and normal or typical, and it's just really nice to see. So it's, those are the ones that really jump out to me.
Absolutely. For me, observant is one.
Yeah.
Because Eric does have mood dysregulation and whatnot. So we're kind of like, I'm keyed into all of his subtleties, like small little facial, like when his eyes get a little wide, I was like, I can tell that something's going on. And I'll never forget, we had a care provider, this was years ago, a sweet guy, and Eric loved him. And they had gone somewhere out in the community. I don't quite remember. And they came out, and Eric was wired for sound, just like, you could almost buzzing with that high level of manic energy, where I knew, like, if I didn't get him into some decompression time, and, we were going to have a problem. And the guy is like, yeah, it was great. And I'm like, he does not see this. We are not seeing the same things. And so that's like, I needed to kind of like, okay, it's always a teachable moment with your care providers, because you are the subject matter expert in your child. 100%. You are the subject matter expert. So you're always looking at these teachable moments. So that was a teachable moment. And I was like, okay, Eric's going to have some quiet time, and we'll go do this. And he's like, and an hour later, he was like, Mr. Calm again. But yeah, that was yeah. So these different qualities, and there are other qualities, but you really have to think and prioritize, like, what is going to be essential for you? And then, of course, what are the skills that they're needing? And most times the individual, like, I even learned this when I was running a day program, like some of our best staff were lousy at documentation. Like they're amazing caregivers, but their strength was in the people part, not the paper part. And so knowing that, it's hard to find the perfect person who's going to be on point with everything, including, medical administration records and records that you have to track. There may be seizure logs, there may be behavioral logs, there may be just your basic data collection for purposes of goal management for your support plan, all those pieces. It's a lot. So balancing that and leaning into closing the gaps, I think, is really important. His issues are, behavioral, mood dysregulation, the intellectual disability that results in a lot of challenges with processing information. It's not so much medical knowledge the same way that it would be if he had a seizure disorder. When do I need to use the rescue meds? Okay, we've got this, we're 5 minutes into our seizure. Do we call 911 at that point? That kind of stuff is going to vary based on person. But these are all the core key skills that I think we would want to emphasize. Time management is a big one for us, and one that I struggle with Eric's staff. And the reason why it becomes such an issue is because Eric has a fair amount of cognitive rigidity, and he needs to follow his schedule. And when his schedule changes or his schedule gets thrown off, that can go into a not so good situation. So time management to manage to that schedule is so important. Planning and organization, especially if you're not doing the planning and organization, somebody's got to do the planning and organization, right? And this is one of the things when Eric was we experimented about a year and a half. It wasn't a group home. He was with one other individual. And it was where it went sideways is the care provider that was in charge was not the best planner. And so Eric is needing his schedule laid out for the month. He needs to know, what are we doing on the month? What are we doing in a week? And especially what are we doing in a day? And if it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and we don't know what we're doing for supper, that's a problem. because we have a schedule and we need to know what's going on. And I'm sure that resonates with a lot of you. A lot of our guys, have that cognitive rigidity and that need for structure you have autism, you have need for structure. So a caregiver with someone with autism is going to need to have better than average skills with planning and organization and time management in order to meet them where they are.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
The reason why we see, the huge uptick in family paid caregivers is because of the pandemic, because, there were fewer care providers and we had to go to a model where families were getting paid to make everything work. And that model has stuck, which is a good thing. So really what you're looking at is agency providers. The upshot of an agency is you get to go, yay, y'all take care of this. And they do. So it's their responsibility to go through all of the recruitment and screening and training and all of that good stuff. And if there's a replacement need, then they're going to be responsible for filling that replacement need. So that's the upshot of an agency provider. Again, I'm a control freak. Is there a support group for control freaks? Because I need to be in it. These recruitment sites, I've had some success on care.com. I've had good success. It's like going fishing. Some days they bite and some days they don't. And, I've posted on care.com and Indeed. There was one time I posted on Indeed and I was like, some people are saying that they can't find anybody. And I have 15 good candidates, 15, 1-5, because I had like 46 responses. Eric being a big guy, I never hire women because it's just not the right. Eric would either like, you're not my mom, like literally, you're not my mom, and not be happy about that. But if it's a younger girl, that he's going to like, oh, hey, baby, it's like, no, none of this is appropriate. So I need a big guy that's, I follow like a peer mentor approach for him. And that has proven so successful for him. So I have to screen out all the females. And I put that on there. Like, I need a male, preferably one that's bigger than Eric. Eric can be a bully. And, so all of Eric's care providers are at least taller than him or the same size as him. And I had this wonderful, wonderful guy, but he was so small. And Eric was like, look down on him. And I'm like, this is going to be a problem. Like when Eric doesn't get his way, he's going to try to bully. I could see it. And so I was like, those are the kinds of dynamics that we really have to think through. But going to care.com and Indeed, these are good places to start to gather that mix. Career fairs and transition fairs are good places to meet people. I went to the Gwinnett transition fair because, BDI was there. I hope y'all saw us there. Yay. And Eric had a job. He went with his care provider to gather information. He was like trick or treat. He has a little bag, went to, have some information, please. And people are giving him all this stuff. But he went with a caregiver that we've known for years, who is not one of Eric's regular staff, but was free that Saturday to come with us. And I was like, you need to use this opportunity to meet and greet. So he had his resumes that he was passing out and connecting with other people. So transition fairs and career fairs are a great place to recruit. Use that social media. If y'all aren't on BDI's Facebook of Georgia Disability Resource Connections, y'all do that. Make that a to-do item for today, because you can put your needs out there. Look at, if you are part of our family support program, we have vendor lists that you can look at, but use your Facebook page, use your other social media. I've seen some wonderful situations where individuals are advertising for caregivers, and they'll describe the situation and they describe what they're looking for, and they get responses to that. So it's a great way to expand your reach. But that nothing is going to replace your networking.
I was just going to, I was just going to say that the networking, I think, piece is the biggest for me. We're not into full-time caregivers for my daughter, but using those teachers and paraprofessionals and camp counselors and, my daughter's ABA therapist from pre-K is still in our life and is still a connection for me to say, what do you think our next steps are? Where, who do we want to have support us in the future? for me, networking has been the top of the line for me. I mean, I talk with Anna frequently or Veronica about, well, maybe she needs a life coach. Do you guys have any recommendations? So I think the networking and the, word of mouth, talk to other families. I mean, you can always do that on Facebook and the BDI Facebook page as well. So it's super important just to communicate with one another, because we all know, who we trust and who we don't. And having that place to go and reach out to someone and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Do you have any referrals or anything is a huge, huge support.
Absolutely. Because that's the thing is, we need to talk about this as a family and share resources, share our connections. Who may have somebody who may not be a great fit for Eric, but may be perfect for you, for your loved one. I have a great guy he's a special ed parapro, and he's super calm and he loves games. He's too small to work with Eric. That's the thing. If it's not an issue, then this guy I cannot recommend more. I have 2 other care providers that I've known for years that are looking to expand. So talk,
Yeah.
put it out there. Yeah. What do they call that when you're manifesting? You put your needs out there to the universe. Yeah. Do that. 100%.
Right.
But put your HR hat on when you're doing this, because you are hiring somebody. So you are going to go through an interview process. You do want to do background checks and references and all that good stuff. Again, figure out what's going to work for you. The rote interview for me, I talk a lot about what his needs are, and it's a behavior-based structured interview process. Was like, this is what the situation is. What would you do? So it's not that, tell me about yourself,
Right.
What are your strengths, the things that you can kind of study up on. No, I'm giving you a scenario. This is what Eric looks like on a bad day, and this is what would happen. What would you do in this situation? How would you handle that? And this does 2 things. Is first, it's a lot of disclosure from me. I'm not trying to scare staff away, but I am absolutely not going into the interviewing process with a rosy glasses dynamic. Those are dark glasses. Okay. And if they're like, wow, I don't know that I want to take this on, then guess what? You're not the right fit. So if I inadvertently kind of scared you away, then that's an outcome I'm happy to live with, because it does get real for our guys. So behavior-based structured interview, don't hesitate to share, what would you do in this situation? What would happen in this situation? And have those real conversations for sure. All right. Yeah. So the legal ethical stuff is kind of easy as it relates to things like the nanny tax and all. This is why we have fiscal agents for waivers. If you have a waiver, we're not concerned about having to pay the nanny tax, because all of that is embedded in that process. When you're paying out of pocket, care.com, those are some things that you want to think about. But agencies and groups are always going to kind of factor that into the mix to make sure that your compensation is appropriate. I think the biggest challenge that I run into is treating my staff like family. And I'm like, sorry, not sorry, because, like we've been talking about Eric's caregiver today, and he's been really close to us for more than 2 years now. And some of Eric's staff have known him for 10 years, 12 years, 14 years. We are kind of family. Eric's first staff was the guy that I was telling you about that was a camp counselor. They were playing Spider-Man, and he was a college student. Now he's got his degree. Now he's got working on his master's. He's married. He's got a 2-year-old. I mean, life has evolved, right? He hasn't been Eric's care provider in years, but he's a natural support to Eric. So he comes by. We still, at least 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to get together and have lunch. He comes up to the house. They still play games. Y'all, it's so sweet. So that's what you're shooting for, I think, is longevity with a connection. And it has to be that right connection to turn into that. But I will be the first one to admit that I probably cross boundaries at times. I do. But these parts, about honoring participants' choice and participants' inclusion and mindful caregiving, these are all things that are always happening, things that we, again, want to discuss. Let me talk just a minute about things that didn't work out. I had a caregiver show up, and this was an agency. I tried once, it did not work out. She showed up, she's wearing scrubs. Like, okay, why are you wearing scrubs? This is not a clinical thing. And Eric was much younger. And, she came in and she immediately sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out her cell phone. And I'm like, yo, want to say hello to him? You're like, why are you I'm going to be blunt. I'm not paying you to sit here and play on your cell phone. Okay. No, I'm not. I don't want you to be on top of him, like having to engage every second for 8 hours. There's got to be that give and take, but there's got to be engagement. And this was the first time that she had, met him, and that she wasn't even, in my view, interested enough to go. I'm like, yeah, we're done. Go home. Bye. I've had a couple of people that I've sent home the same day, and one that I thought was a good fit, that I talked to for many times. And then the vibe, there's one guy, the vibe was just off. I'm like, if the hair on the back of your neck goes up, just recognize that. Like, I don't know what that is, but no. And then one guy who was so sweet and, had all the love, care, gentleness, all that kind of stuff, calm, all that. But we were in the car and a bug got in the car and he was shrieking. I'm like, if you lose it over a fly, you are creating the problem here. Like, no, that is not going to work.
Right.
No, absolutely not. So yeah, that was a one-day hire too. So we all have our one-day hires. Those are our lessons learned, Yeah, I think we're right in the middle of talking about best practices. It's okay. If it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. And just call it a day. You don't need to drag it out. Let's give it one more time. Maybe it's me. No, if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. Anita, do you have any things that you want to share that?
Not at the moment. And I'm not into the caregivers, or I'm not into, but my daughter doesn't have them yet. But I mean, just as you were talking about the caregiver getting into the car and freaking out about a fly, I just remember, my daughter has a lot of good friends, but there's some friends that I, will have over more frequently than the other friends, because some of the other friends are a little too escalated, for her. And one great example is we were getting in the car to take her friend home, and I come out and my daughter is really freaking out, and he's in the back seat all over the place. It was a moth or they thought it was a moth. But so, yeah, it escalated so fast. And then she was upset. And typically, she will get upset. And then hours later, we'll come back and have almost another episode because of that panic. So it was so significant to me to know, to have that experience, to recognize that if somebody's going to act like that, well, maybe it's not such a great benefit, because when that person is gone and then she escalates into something else again, it's hard for me to de-escalate, so it's really being mindful of those people, of whoever is around, and whether it can be I don't want to keep friends from her, and I don't, but there's some that come over a little more frequently than others, for sure.
I would say one of my best practices in management is inviting them to be part of the full process. Like we had Eric's ISP just a couple of weeks ago, and it's just like, that was an all hands on deck kind of like, hey guys, this was like, even if you can't be here for the ISP, I had 2 caregivers that were able to attend the ISP, but I got input from everybody. I'm like, this is what, let's look at his current one. Like if your caregiver can't articulate what their goals are, then they're not working on those goals. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but part of, especially if you have a waiver, we have individualized support goals. They need to be aware of what those goals are so they can track data on those goals and maintain that documentation. But they should also have input on what those goals should be. And so we had like a pre-ISP meeting with, my team that I was having like individually, and like, what do you think? Like, what are your recommendations? So that when we can come to the ISP already having had a lot of conversation around what's working, what could be working better, what are strengths that we want to continue to maintain, what are emerging strengths? Like, what are we seeing that's coming up that we need to hone in on and continue to develop? What's something that either he's mastered, and so we don't really need to focus on that anymore, or it's too touchy. It's like, that's going to be almost like more difficult than what it would be worth to try to do. What can we see some leverage on? So those are the kinds of conversations that I think you want to have. And I have check-ins with my staff, what are you seeing? And we maintain a fair amount of data, and there's a lot of interaction and communication. One of Eric's former staff has kind of come back, and he spends like one day a week with Eric now. And I had forgotten his style is, I've got this, Anna, you go do you, and then they're gone for like 4 hours. And I don't know what the heck is going on. And his current staff is always letting me know what's going on. Like, okay, we made it to such and such a place, and his mood is stable. He'll send me pictures. And I love it when they send pictures. That's a me thing. Y'all may not need that, but it works for me. And so it's a matter of your needs getting, honestly, your needs getting met too. But recognizing that difference, that was funny, because I found myself texting, y'all okay? Everything good? Because I haven't heard from you. I think another good practice is to carve out time to map out that schedule together, and to always start the day with the schedule and end the day with a debrief. Eric's staff is going to come over around 12:30. He's going to text me and 11:30ish, what's the schedule for today? Even though we've talked about it yesterday, because things change, right? And so he wants to pinpoint what exactly are we doing and what does that look like, so that he can be on point for the time management part, but keeping things organized. If I have a schedule and I haven't communicated that effectively to Eric's staff, and they inevitably say something different, Eric's confused, and he's going to escalate because he's getting conflicting information. So we always have to be on the same page. Well, I hope this has been helpful for y'all. Y'all take care, and thank you so very much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
This was BDI Empowers, your guide to independent living. Join us again next month to learn more about simplifying disability benefits.